can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Marty Menard of GiantCreative.ca. Before I formally introduce you, Marty, I always like to point out other podcast episodes people should check out. Since this is part of the Top Agency series, I had Jason Swank on. Jason Swank talked about how he built his agency up to over 8 figures and sold it, and then he was buying up agencies, and he's got an agency group as well. So check those. There's 2 episodes out, and he talks about the kind of the valuation, the agency space, business in general. Really great episode. Todd Taskey also was a good episode, and he pairs private equity with agencies. So he helps sell agencies, and he's got the Second Bite podcast because he's found that sometimes people make more on the second bite than they do on the first. So when the private equity sells this again, that company has a percentage equity and makes more than they did on the first bite. So it's really interesting perspective, and also talks about just M&A deals and valuations, and just a smart guy. And another one that was good was Kevin Hurrigan, who's had an agency since 1995, who runs Spinutech. So it was interesting to hear the evolution just of the internet at that point and how he pivoted his business and the ups and downs. So check those out and more on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. So we do the accountability, the strategy, and the full execution. You know, Marty, call ourselves the magic elves that work in the background to make it look easy for the host so they can create amazing content, develop amazing relationships, and actually, most importantly, run their business. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships, and I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com to learn more. I'm excited to introduce Marty Menard. He's the president of Giant Creative, and their company is a leading advisor to many nonprofits, franchises, and to national brands that include McDonald's Canada, Sola Salon Studios, Chairman's Brands, and many, many more. And Marty is a former serial entrepreneur, and he knows what it takes to build something from the ground floor, and how to best invest resources for growth and leadership and much more. We're going to have some great conversations around those today. Marty, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Just start off and talk a little bit about Giant Creative and what you do. And for people listening, there is a video version. And so I'm going to pull up their site and we're going to poke around as he's talking. Marty, tell us about Giant Creative.
Yeah, Giant Creative, we call ourselves a data-driven marketing agency. We really believe in the power of data. So we're an end-to-end marketing agency. We look for client partners where there's not a part of the equation that we don't want a piece of. So whether it be performance marketing and all that falls under that, whether it be a conversion campaigns where we're driving leads to sell franchises, whether we're driving leads to sell pizzas, whether we're driving donations for our nonprofits, performance marketing and lead generation are a big part of what we do. But we have a full team here, end-to-end marketing. So whether it be, there's nothing on the omni channels that we can't contribute to and have been. And as you're pulling up, I think, you can see McDonald's Canada, you can see the London Health and Sciences Foundation, 2 great clients that represent 2 of our big, strong verticals where we get to do end-to-end marketing, where we're not being hired as, say, just a service provider, where it's not simply, hey, build us a website and then we're done. Shoot us a bit of video and then we're done. We want to work with you from end to end, from ideation to execution and everything in between. And that's kind of our approach.
I want to talk about niche for a second. How did you decide on come to nonprofits and franchising? I know a lot of businesses, all businesses, and specifically agencies, sometimes struggle with niching.
It's interesting, right? And I think in the beginning, when we started Giant Creative, and I think it's important to note that we're only, we're barely 4 years old. So we're a relatively new agency. And as you mentioned off the top, serial entrepreneur, myself and my business partner, Andrew Stevenson, big shout out, our CEO and director and our chief video officer. He and I were entrepreneurs at heart. As you put up there, you also have Kyle Gershbain, who is our chief marketing officer, and that's the leadership team right there. But Andrew and I, started this company 4 years ago, and we did what a lot of entrepreneurs do in the beginning, right? You kind of you'll take whatever someone will hire you. So if a client reached out to us, I had a network, he had a network. We came from different backgrounds. He came from video, I came from other agencies. So we have a network there. Someone said, we need a website. Okay, we'll figure that out. We need some video content. Excellent. We need a digital campaign. Great. We can sell it to you. Take that sale, take that money and reinvest it in the company. And what happened as we started to go through, we started to learn which clients we were getting the most success with and which clients that allowed us to be able to look at that end-to-end picture and kind of forward the kind of client partnership and relationships that we wanted. And that kind of fed into where we can work with a variety of verticals, but there's something so beautiful about the nonprofit world and their strong need. And it's such a competitive space that any opportunity to differentiate is really attractive to us at Giant Creative, because it gives us the opportunity to get big wins for them in a space that is very challenging. It's everyone's vying for donor dollars, and we've come up with some really great solutions that allowed us to get success. And then on the franchising side, to be honest with you, I came from a franchising background in terms of marketing, and I have a great network there. There's an organization in Canada called the Canadian Franchise Association, and I'm a very big participant in that organization. I'm on one of the marketing day committees. I do a lot of this weekend coming, not this weekend, the following, I'm doing a couple panels at one of their big shows. I'm running a roundtable at their big convention. I've been there and immersed in that for quite some time, and I know it really well. I know what their needs are. I know what their challenges are. And we've been able to, because of that network, it was just a natural fit. Nonprofits kind of happened by just the right company, the right organization working with us and us developing successful strategies and being able to double down on that. And then we started working with Child Fund International and the YMCA and a whole host of other nonprofits because we really understood it. Franchising is one of those things that I had 10, 15 years experience and I just brought to the table. So you can't be everything to everybody, but those were two niches we could really double down on. And interestingly, Dr. Jeremy, there's a lot in common. And even though they may seem like very different niches, the approaches are very, very similar from an end to end in terms of looking at the first party data and being able to create really interesting and engaging campaigns and speaking to the right targets whether you're getting a donation or whether you're selling a pizza or a pizza franchise, you're still looking at the tools that get you there and the mechanisms that get you there. There's a lot of alignment.
Talk about some of the lessons you learned in the franchise space.
Well, there's a lot of lessons to learn there, right? So I think one of the first things you come up against when it comes to franchising is you might be surprised to find this out, but we work with some fairly big brands, McDonald's Canada, Chairman Brands, family of brands. They have 5 successful brands and 300 locations collectively across Canada. And remember, Canada is not the United States, right? Our whole population is 38 million people. So it's smaller population wise than the state of California. So when you're looking at how when you've got 1,200 unique franchise organizations, all vying for the same dollar, all vying to try to find that same that franchise lead that allow them to reach their growth goals of we want 25 new franchises in Southwestern Ontario. Well, there's 1,200 other franchises vying for that same franchise lead, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with that vertical, but there's as many franchise brokers out there working on behalf of franchise organizations as there are car dealerships. And it's a really cutthroat, kill or be killed approach. So what was really good a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, that approach no longer works anymore. It's really important now that when we look at franchising, we do approach franchise lead generation no differently than donor registration, where we look at, well, who is the targeted buyer for a pizza franchise in Northern Ontario versus who's the buyer for McDonald's Canada in Western Canada, right? There's often a quite a different buyer persona. So we need to look at that first party data, and we need to dive into a content strategy. People weren't doing that as much 5-10 years ago with the franchise. They were like McDonald's Canada is a great example. They, for the longest time, did zero franchise advertising. They just put their website up with a franchise link, and they just got loads and loads of leads. But that changed for them. And though they still get a high volume of leads organically, the quality of those leads continues to drop down. And because there was no engagement piece and no piece that spoke specifically to these targeted demographics, and not even doing that, taking that first party data and turning it into really meaningful buyer personas, that's why their leads were dropping, but they didn't know why. So they had to almost create a new department in the last few years. And franchise lead generation for McDonald's Canada is really it's less than 10 years old. And they've actually only applied real budget over the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years. So, and it's much smaller than their budget for just selling, their products, right? So it's a really busy space. And franchisors are just starting to realize that they need to spend money on lead gen in a way that they didn't have to do even 5 years ago.
I want to talk about your process because this relates to that, but it's really interesting because I would think they would want to spend a lot of money on this because they make a recurring percentage off every single one of these things. So I would think the budget would be high. They get one of these. I don't know what it is. I'm sure it ranges from 5 to 10%. And that is significant lifetime value of a client when you talk about lifetime value, right?
We'll look at McDonald's. I mean, to even enter into the application process, you're going to need $1 million liquid, right? And think about that in a country like Canada with 38 million people. And who has, liquid $1 million. So that's going to shrink that number significantly, right? So we agree with you. It's shocking to us to this day that these franchise development departments are given the smaller budgets. McDonald's, and I'm not going to get into obviously how much they spend because we love them as a client and we've got great success for them, which we can speak about. But it's pervasive that this is something that is really new to a lot of these organizations. Now, that being said, there are some very successful organizations that know how to spend and allocate a lot of dollars and get great success. There's a client out there that's not ours, but I'm familiar with the agencies that do good work for them in Canada called Cobb's Bread. And they're a wonderful agency. And one of our partners, Cadence Franchising, we love them. They do a lot of lead nurturing for their franchise leads. That organization, they spend the required amount of resources, and they're the fastest growing bakery franchise in Canada. And they're doing it right. So they've become a new model. And those models are allowing us to go back to these other organizations and say, listen, this is what success is. This is the investments necessary. And we're starting to get that buy-in. And because I have a bit of that, I have again, it's a small community and most of them are connected to the Canadian Franchise Association. There's a bit of a trust factor that can happen there. But, these are organizations, if whatever the 2024 budget is, that's what it is for now. And I have to prove they need to double that for 2025 and beyond. And it is surprising, but it's remarkably common.
I'm also surprised that, like you said, I would think, like most of the times I wouldn't, you put it up and they will come. But for McDonald's, I would expect that because it's such a known brand. Why do you think it's decreased? Is it just competition of other franchises come in? Because I would think, McDonald's would be very desirable for people.
Well, and it is desirable, but I think what happened with McDonald's is because this is a really interesting fact about McDonald's versus a lot of the other franchise organizations, is that if Chairman Brand's one of our clients, or Sola Salon, who actually is a very successful American franchise entering Canada, and we're their Canadian agency to help them on the both national and local level, they're kind of doing it that traditional way where they're looking at the regions they want to attach themselves to. We want to grow in Ontario, we want to grow in Vancouver, Alberta. These are our big markets. But McDonald's doesn't work like that. McDonald's, you don't get to pick where you go. So, if you were living in let's just say Toronto, Ontario, and you pass the application process, you have to, and if they decide that they're going to give you the one in Calgary, then you're moving your whole family and that's where you have to go. So it's a very different challenge. And today, because there's so many choices and you can get really successful restaurants for a much smaller buy-in, and you can have a bit more control of your destiny, that started working against McDonald's Canada in that way. And they needed to diversify that messaging. And one of the biggest challenges was, even though they are, over 1,400 restaurants serving like almost 3 million Canadians every day, they started also seeing that they were losing diversity. They weren't getting female entrepreneurs. They weren't having, new Canadians were not applying, even though we discovered through our research that 48% of wealth in Canada in the last decade is attached to new Canadians, right? And it was a market they didn't know how to serve. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier, them not taking that first party data, not doing research ahead of time, and just keeping their fingers crossed. So when they wanted to go out and try to appeal to that diverse audience, being females, and they only had 3 or 4 female franchise owners in Canada, they needed to, how do we do that? How do we grow our diversity on female and new Canadians? Because it wasn't working, that sort of whole build it and they will come model, right? So you asked about process, and our process is always and forever begins with research. There's a great expression, I can't remember the marketer who quoted it, but doing marketing without research is like driving with your eyes closed. I don't recommend doing it. And that first party data, when we're looking at everything from age and gender and income level and geolocation and education level and new Canadian status, that we need to do that work. And they have first party data, but we can also do that research based on the target they're going for. That allows us to inform our creative strategy. I think I said at the top, when you asked me about Giant, we are a data-driven agency. Data informs everything we do. It's really easy. I mean, I've got a team of fantastic designers and video production. We'll make things look pretty, but it has to resonate with the audience you're speaking to. So the data has to tell us who we go after. That informs our creative strategy. That research informs every decision. I'll give you a quick example. So we came up with a couple of demographics or buyer personas based on what, on what we discovered in terms of they needed, have 1.5 million liquid. We're looking for diverse audiences. We're looking for whatever territories. So then we go out and we test those ads, right? Test, learn, optimize. That's our approach. So what we discovered after only a couple months of running the campaigns, we found a new demographic. So we looked at who was engaging with these ads, and we found, 35 plus new mothers who were on paternity leave or maternity leave. They didn't want to go back to the corporation. They were looking for new opportunities. They had money. They wanted to work for themselves, and they had a year off to make decisions. And we were getting an enormous amount of engagement. So then we created new messaging that spoke to them. And in our first 90 to 100 days, we were able to bring them 3 new franchise leads that went through the application process. That's going to be ultimately $1 million for each one of those right out of the gate. And their ad spend was significantly smaller than that. So their return on investment was significant, but it was because we did that research, because we, tested and optimized. And then that kind of informed every decision, from creative to the landing page where we drove the ads to, what kind of content strategy, what was that messaging, and then of course where we deployed the ads, what platforms were those audiences using, what if they're big users on the Globe and Mail, ensuring the ads show up there and so forth. So we're very, very data centric, and that's got all the results in the world. And now we're talking to a few more of the McDonald's worldwide about doing the same thing for them now because of that process being successful.
It's really interesting. And I'm glad you kind of brought up the next question I was curious about, which is the creative. What worked, what didn't because there's a lot of moving pieces with these things. I mean, the creative, the messaging, the landing page. What were some of the things that you learned? What worked and what didn't work with some of those pieces?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that's kind of our approach with test, learn, optimize. So still talking about McDonald's, because that was a really interesting one. Because again, I'm going to continue to go back, talk about niche. This is niche upon niche. So looking for, in a country of 38 million people, women and new Canadians with the wealth needed and the openness to be able to maybe move out of province to another, from and across the country. That audience was pretty darn small. But we needed to ensure that the messaging that we would give to a new Canadian is different than the messaging we're going to give potentially to maybe a female entrepreneur or a family, right? Maybe it's a couple, right, that comes in that wants to start working together. Then we discover, and really the learning I just talked about, we had this creative centered around, we did this full campaign where we went into, we found all of their female and diverse franchise that we could bring to one location. And we formulated these, this questionnaire, and we sat down, we spent a couple days interviewing them, talking with them, speaking to them about their experience. Why was it relevant to them? What was their story? Because really it's marketing, it is storytelling. And if you're going to engage with somebody on a meaningful level, a level enough to go, I'm going to go and start the application process, knowing full well, this is going to end up being 6 months of my life to get through to and I'm going to have to invest $1 million or whatever that might be. You need to be able to speak to that person in a way that's relevant to them. So what is relevant to say, Drew and Lisa in Nova Scotia who run a McDonald's franchise? Why did they do it? What is special about McDonald's and the way they treat them and how the organization runs? How has it made their lives better? What are their goals? How have they achieved those goals? And so on and so forth. And then we created a content strategy around that where we showcased, we leveraged the power of video because it's still one of the most powerful tools, and you can get so much more across in a very short period of time. And we just shined a light on that information. And then we took that and drew our messaging and our content strategy around that. So it continued to shape and reshape. And the first example was that learning where we weren't at all advertising to new mothers who are on maternity leave. And that was a really interesting learn. So then we created content and messaging that messaging might even just be the imagery. That's in a static ad or a small animated ad where that just speaks to someone, that woman at home, small child beside her. And the messaging is going to be different than the message that's going to a diverse audience out of Alberta. That's a new Canadian that's come in to the country looking for opportunities. It's a whole different message, right? So it's really fun how that research can inform the creative. And we're really excited by one of our big things we do with our clients is we make we take the research, we take the data, and we come up with these initial ideas, these personas, but we're never glued to anything. We do not have an ego about what we do. We're quite the opposite, right? We want to go every month and go, this is what we learned, and this was exciting, and this is what we thought was going to work, and we were wrong. That didn't work as much. Over here, we want to double down on this messaging, and this A/B tested because ads B they killed it for us. Look at the different level of engagement, right? So let's create some more content that supports that messaging because we know it works. And that's an ongoing process for us month after month. When you combine that with leveraging the actual data and being able to use the remarketing, and I'm sure you know what remarketing it is. Anybody who's listening, if you've ever Googled looking for a certain brand name, you want to buy a new pair of shoes or boots, and then everywhere you go, all these ads are showing you.
They follow you around everywhere.
They follow you around. That's remarketing. I know it can drive people crazy, but it's our bread and butter.
You know what? Actually, I like it because it's almost like a bookmark for me. I like when then maybe that's weird. I like being remarketed to because I click on it and I'm going to forget to go back to it. And so I'm like, oh, cool. That's fine. Like it'll come up because I do actually want to buy something and I just maybe don't have the time right then. So I clicked at it to research it. So as a consumer, I actually like it personally.
I'm the same way because I like I want to. I don't want to be fed stuff that's not interested to me. That's not interested to me, or products that don't matter to me. So I'm completely comfortable with it as well. And I think generationally, I mean, I'm an older guy, as you can tell from the. I used to be salt and pepper, but it's all salt now in the hair and beard. My generation tends to be the ones that don't embrace it as much. But if you're 30 years old or under, it's normal. And they feel the same way that you do, Dr. Jeremy. Everyone we speak to, all the research tells us, people love being fed content that is meaningful and important to them and in their interests and things of value. That's what they want. They do not want to be fed things that aren't interesting to them. So if you're searching it, if you're talking and your phone picks it up, if you clicked on an ad, they've shown interest. So talking to them again and following them around to kind of hopefully get to that conversion, we don't get any pushback. And I think that's really speaks to why it's such an effective way to drive conversions. Remarketing is a big part of our strategy, and it does produce great results. And I think it speaks to people feeling the exact same way that you do.
I want to hear about through the research you discover obstacles, like why people are not converting or getting further in the process. And I would love to hear what obstacles you found, and we could talk specifically at McDonald's, but I do want to point out, I love how you talk about the niche. And then because of that niche, you can speak directly to that person. You can speak directly to their wants, their needs. And I did an episode with Corey Quinn. He was CMO of Scorpion, helped grow them from 20 million to 150 million. He talks exactly on this, on the niche topic. But from the research phase, what are some of the obstacles? I mean, I could see okay, you have to invest over $1 million. That's obviously an obstacle. But what are some other obstacles that you found that were holding people back?
Oh my goodness, there are so many, and some of them are much more obvious. So one of our other, I mean, if you could see this, I'm trying to make sure that I'm parsing my words carefully, but you can see this on many a franchise organization's website. Any organization that offers franchising for their restaurant, for their clothing store, whatever it might be, whatever their business is, they're going to probably have a franchise page. And one of the first things we do before we touch a client is we audit all of their digital assets, all of their collateral in general around whatever we're going to be doing for them. So if we're driving franchise leads, as an example, then we are going to go out and do a complete audit of everything. And we're going to start to understand what those obstacles are. And some of the biggest obstacles are really where you see the largest bounce rates. Like we brought on a client recently that was getting really decent traffic, but their bounce rate was over 86%. And that bounce rate is that's the first stumbling block and roadblock. Why did they not fill out a form? Why did they not engage further? Why, when they hit that website or landing page, did they not find it? And did they only spend 6 seconds there or less? Why couldn't we get them on a minute? And there's a number of different things that can come up. So one of the biggest things we see is that the ads themselves that are driving to drive a conversion, they either don't go to a landing page, they just go to the website of that company and organization. So right away, the person's going, hey, I saw an ad. It said I can, open up a certain territory. They're waiving a franchise fee. And then they click on that. And what they get is a completely different messaging. And the moment the messaging and from the ad to the website or whatever the landing page is different, people are gone. People right away go, this is not what I'm looking for, because they're literally no one very rarely outside of a couple organizations are shopping for one brand. They're looking at a variety of brands. So they want to know what that experience is like. And the moment they don't get that information right away that the ad promised, they bounce. The other thing we see all the time, and this is definitely around not just franchise lead, but we see it with clients that sell, a certain service. The form that you have to fill out, maybe you've done this, where you're Googling something, you go to a website and you want to book a consultation, and the form is like 7, 8, 9, 10 fields long, and they require all this information. And people just go, I'm not filling this out. I just want to give my name, email, send me some info, right? Yeah. It's
funny because even with reaching out and be like, hey, Marty, I'd love to have you on the podcast. I try and make it as simple as possible because everyone's busy, and easily be like, I've seen forums that are insane. As being a guest, I'm like, why you're making people fill this out? That's crazy. Like, busy people are just don't want to deal with it. They may be really interested, but they don't want to deal with it. So I totally, this applies to every market.
Every single market. And we're at the point now where it's also unnecessary. I think that's what's really interesting about the franchise organization. And it definitely falls on the nonprofit side. We see it as well, is there's too much friction to get the information you need. And people just don't have the time, as you say, but they're conditioned to go. There's plenty of sites out there that will give them what they want. So they're not going to waste time on yours if you're not meeting that for them. We had a really interesting example would be Sola Salons, who has, I think, over 700 locations at this stage throughout the United States and 5 in Canada. They just entered. But this is a classic example of they're them shooting themselves in the foot in terms of all of their Canadian.
I'm pretty sure they have a bunch in Chicago too.
Oh, they do. They're a huge organization, extremely successful and wonderful people. Love working with them. But if you go to their Canadian website, which doesn't exist, and you want to select a location, it's something as simple as select state. You have to find Ontario under state, not province. Just these little details that get missed that have a huge impact on that person's
people are
experience.
Like, what's ON? Like, I don't like, I'm searching through the states.
That's right. And it really erodes trust, right? And I think that's the big one. And also, and this goes back to something we talked about earlier, even the websites that have good forums, does the messaging from the key messages, from the headlines to the first pieces of information you see, whether it be visual, like video or photography, whether it be stats, whether it just be copy, is it speaking to the target audience that you're driving there? That's probably one of the biggest canyons between, you're putting an ad out and you don't even know who your target audience is and what they care about. And then you drive them to a landing page to fill out a form, and none of the messaging speaks to their needs. That's one of the biggest education pieces that we have to do for franchise organizations. And if you go to McDonald'sfranchising.ca, a site that we built, the landing page we built, we had to work very hard over months just to develop that content to ensure that it's very targeted and very niche. But that's why we got the huge engagement. I mean, month one, we drove something like 9,000 clicks. We generated over 800 leads and got 25 applications in our first 4 weeks. And it's not that we're, I'm going to toot our own horn, but it just speaks to the power of removing those impediments, taking those learnings and applying them in a way that is going to make the engagement that much stronger for whoever your customer is.
What made you, Marty, start the agency in the first place?
Oh my goodness, how much time do we have, Dr. Jeremy? And I love calling you Dr. Jeremy, by the way. It's just way too much fun to say. So, at heart, I'm an entrepreneur, and as I said, my business partner and I, we'd had our own businesses separate from one another, and marketing became, as an entrepreneur with my own businesses, no different than you. You learn that you have to market your own business, right? And you start to develop this relationship with marketing in a way that it's the reason why it's called sales and marketing. Right. And it's still a good headache, even though you'd be surprised how many times the sales department and the marketing department in organizations don't communicate very well. But small entrepreneurs understand that those things are intricately tied. So as I got better and better at marketing my businesses through my own endeavors and trial and error, marketing became I just developed an acumen, made some connections, and I started working for agencies. And the last agency I was at before I formed Giant with my business partner was an agency that was built around franchise marketing. And, I just loved, I love everything about marketing. Because I love sales. I love business. I mean, my title is President and Chief Business Development Officer, but that really just means I'm the head sales guy. And I love it. I love going out and communicating. I love networking. I love talking to people. It's what fuels me all day. I'm sitting in front of a computer. It's not what I want to do. I want to be out. I want to be networking. I want to do panels. I want to be speaking. I want to engage with people and see how I can help them. And so marketing became something that was really a good fit because I knew what I was selling. I was selling an opportunity to deliver on a promise. If you, every company out there, their marketing really at its core is delivering on the promises they make. And I love helping them do that. So it became something I really loved. But then, you work for somebody else and, the ceiling can sometimes be a glass ceiling. And Andrew, my business partner, now he had his own agency at the time under a different name. And it was very much a video production content agency. And I had hired him by their agency and we really clicked. And what's really engaging or what's interesting, is this was like, in COVID, like we built and launched our business in COVID of all things. And I was unhappy at the agency I was at because I wasn't getting the growth opportunities I was looking for. He was producing great content and was really, he would hand over these beautiful pieces of content, long form or short form video to organizations and then just watch nothing happen with it. And him and I shared those value systems of wanting to, to take it to the next level and really support and help this, help the client. So, we kind of came together and felt like, maybe we could grow an agency together. I've got enough experience as an entrepreneur. I've been in agency life now for 10 years. He'd been a content producer his whole career. Why don't we do this? And of course, just as we're talking about it, COVID happens. And there's literally 4 of us, right? There's myself, Andrew. We had one guy who was a designer, and we had a part-time production coordinator and a part-time, so there's 5 of us, editor. And Andrew was a big part of producing the content. So there was 4 or 5 of us. And we, in our first 3.5 years to where we are now, we've grown from low 6 digits annually to mid 7 digits. We grew from 4 people to over 25 staff. And we went literally from 3 or 4 local organizations to be able to work with national brands, both in Canada and the United States. And it's been a really exciting ride. But I think at my heart, I'm a sales guy and I love building relationships and networking and being able to help them deliver on that promise. Because if they get success, I get success. And that's such a wonderful relationship to have with the people. Like my clients are my friends. We just got taken out for a wonderful night by one of our successful clients, and they treated us so well. And I've got relationships that are friendships and that have grown out of being able to help them deliver on their promises and get success. And that fuels Andrew, I, and our team every single day. So we just love doing it.
Love it. Marty, I have one last question.
Sure.
And I just want to thank you for sharing your story and journey and lessons. And people can check out giantcreative.ca to learn more. My last question is tattoos. And I'm always wondering, there's always significance behind that. So I know at the very beginning, before we hit record, you're like, I'm not telling anything personal. No, I'm just, you're joking around. But I'd love to have you share just some of the significance of any of the tattoos that you have.
Well, that's a really interesting question and one I wasn't ready for, but I'm very happy to answer, my friend. As far as personal questions go, that's the best one you could have asked me. So, again, as I said earlier, I've been around a while. So some of these tattoos, they've been with me for a long time. And for me, what I love about, I'm a big music lover. I came from the arts as a young person, my background, and I love any form of, and I think this is tied to marketing and why I like it so much. I love communication. And I think, when something's important to you, I resonate with the idea of putting it on my body, as many people do, really. That's not uncommon. I'm not an anomaly in any way. I'm very much part of the norm. So I remember, I got a really interesting one that is the first couple lines, one of the first tattoos I ever got, and it's almost impossible to read now. But I was reading the Nelson Mandela autobiography, and there was this wonderful quote he used from Marianne Williamson that he used in his speech when he became prime minister after everything he had went through. And, you know, it resonated with me on such a meaningful level. And it's our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And I swear to you, as a 20-something-year-old, that hit me like a ton of bricks. It made me realize that, hey, my insecurity doesn't come from a fear of failure. My insecurities come from a fear of success and the responsibility that success means. It's easy to not do well. That's the easiest thing in the world, right? The challenge is constantly getting up and trying every single day and loving yourself to do that enough and to value yourself and the people you want to surround yourself with. And that really hit me hard. And that was one of the first things I ever put on my body, you know, however many years ago now, 25 or more years ago. And that's one of them. And then of course I've got, you know, I'm a proud father of almost 10-year-old daughter. And of course her name I got tattooed on me right after she was born, maybe a month old. There's a picture somewhere on my Facebook of her laying on my lap as someone, you know, tattooed her name into my arm. And then I extended that with a huge shoulder tattoo that is a giant monkey in a tree with eyelashes sticking her tongue out because Monkey is her nickname. And people know her as Monkey. So my whole arm, and she knows that's her. And so, and it's those kinds of things that
let's see the shoulder.
My goodness. You know, the bicep isn't what it used to be, my friend. But if you can see up front here, the eyelashes and the tongue sticking out, that really speaks about who my daughter is. She's an absolute monkey. So yeah, it's these things they're very important to me, and they're not arbitrary. Nothing on me is arbitrary. Everything has a story.
Yeah, I love it. Marty, thank you so much. Everyone check out giantcreative.ca, and we'll see everyone next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Dr. Jeremy.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like $100 grand.